Hi, welcome to Bob's Prop Shop. I'm Videobob. Today, we're going to be talking about the Ghostbusters Proton Pack. We have a Ghostbusters Proton Pack do-it-yourself kit that you can assemble all the parts so that you can build your own Proton Pack. Now this video today is going to concentrate on the pack itself. We're not going to be talking about the neutrino wand, the thrower, or also known as the gun, and we're not going to be doing the electronics. This is just the pack itself. So, let's get started. All right, laid out here on the table are all the parts that we use to build the Proton Pack. Now let's start with some of the most basic parts. Of course you have the shell. When you get your kit, you're going to have this fiberglass shell just like this. It comes to you already painted with the holes already cut for you. But you are going to have to do some drilling and gluing on this thing. But this is hand-laid fiberglass with a gel coat finish, and we paint everything in flat black. I like to use Rust-Oleum's 2X cover. It's got a primer built into it. It's a really good paint, so if you need to touch up any of the parts, you can pick up this paint at Home Depot. This is a great paint. This is about the best stuff you're going to get. It's great for plastic, and this is what we use exclusively. We don't have an endorsement with them or anything, but if you want to paint match what we're doing, this is the stuff you're going to need. We glue all of our parts together with this Loctite epoxy. This is a two-part epoxy. It's really strong stuff, 3,500 pounds per square inch. You're going to get to know this stuff intimately because we use it a lot. Once you put it on, it's so strong that if you glue a part to the fiberglass, if you wanted to break it off, it would literally separate the layers of glass before the part would break off. That's how strong it is, but we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So the shell is very special. You may have already heard the stories about the shell. This shell came from a mold that originated from the original film-used molds. It's a long story, but basically this is the real legit thing. So this part has been casted from one of the original molds used in the screen-used parts. Everything else is something that we've made. Now, let's talk about all the parts on the pack, and I'll compare them. You'll notice this U-shaped rainbow-like thing. This is called the bumper, or the bumper guard, and this goes on the pack here, and you'll notice its orientation. You want the slotted side to the right, smooth side to the left, and it doesn't necessarily fit all the way down flush. It sort of sits up a little bit, and you'll notice there's some ridges here, and this spot here, and here, and you'll align it in such a way in between those ridges so that it sits about a ½ inch off when you mount it. And all you got to do is pick your location, drill a couple of 1/4 inch holes through this thing wherever you want, and use some 1/4 by 20 bolts and run them through and tighten them down. You don't necessarily have to drill all the way through this and mount it to the shell, but you can if you want. Then you have the booster tube. This is basically a PVC pipe with this thing added on top, and it's been cut specifically to fit our shell. You'll notice that the angle of the cut fits exactly perfectly. And what you want to do is align it. If you look at from the overhead shot here, you'll see how this lines up exactly. Now, this is called the riser tower. Now, the riser tower has some weld lines on it. You can sand those off if you like, if you prefer the smoother finish, or you can leave them on. You may have to do a little bit of finish sanding to these. You're going to have to drill a few holes here and there for the mounting of the clippered fittings. There's one here, there's one there, and just refer to any photos that you have online or the printed instructions that we have. But as you can see with this one here, you've got the, and if you can get the real resistors, go ahead and get them, but we give you the plastic ones just in case. I think this is 25 watt resistor. This thing ends up going in there like that. Then you have this 50 watt one that goes, where does that go? It goes on the other side here. And then you've got a smaller one that fits here. Now you can put a dab of super glue or some of the epoxy and then actually put real screws in there for realism. And then what's cool about these is you can simply drill a hole in there and your hoses, which I'll show you later, can just stab in there, put a dab of glue on there, and that'll hold them. Some other fittings that fit into the pack. These are called Legris Straights. Now Legris, spelled Legris, which was a French pneumatic fitting company. They no longer make these fittings, so we've had to make castings of them. You just won't find these. I mean, I've seen some of them floating around. You could pay 40 or 50 bucks for that one little fitting, but we give it to you. It's simply spray paint it with gold paint or brass paint, and it looks just like the real thing. Now there's a couple of holes on the side of the pack. You'll notice, let me move that out of the way. There's a couple little divots there that you'll see on the pack, and you'll see where to drill the holes. But basically, if you look on the pack, you can see where we've added them in. And of course, always refer to your Ghostbusters DVD, and also look online for all of the pictures that they have out there. But this riser tower with this resistor will face outward and go here. You'll notice some little etchings here help with the gluing. And what you're going to want to do is, once you have this where you want it, you put your layer of glue, let that sit and seal, and then you're going to want to bump this riser tower right up against it there. Now you can use a hot glue gun to simulate welds. You don't want to use it for attaching part, but just for adding realism. So you can take a small hot glue gun, you can pick one up from Walmart for $3 or $4, and you can run a little bead of hot glue along here and along the top here before you paint it, and it'll look just like a real weld line. That's one way of doing it. You can also do it with clays or epoxies. But the hot glue gun, and the trick is just to put a little dab, and then a little dab, you know, just like when you're welding, one little dot after another. Not a straight line, just a series of dots, which is how we got the effect that you'll see here. And you can simulate that and it'll match up. And once those parts are glued together, it should look like that. Okay, let's talk about some of the other parts. These are called the injector tubes, these tubes here. And they hang below what's known as the power cell. Let me remove these so you can see. Now, these are a little bit more tricky. You're going to want to epoxy these onto this space right here and glue them into place using the epoxy. You're going to want to invest in a large clamp. You can get these at Home Depot or any hardware store. One of our favorite places to shop is Harbor Freight. You can get anything in the world at Harbor Freight. If you don't have one near you, go online and order the parts you need. But get yourself a nice big clamp that you can mount underneath here and to this where you can clamp it on. Pressure is one of the best ways to glue things on. So when you apply the glue and you set this, I think the setting time on this is only 5 minutes. So it doesn't take very long. And we're going to talk about how to make these parts stay on even stronger. But once you've got this glued on, we have our hose kit that we'll show you momentarily. And the hoses will simply just stab right in here, okay? You can see how we just stuck them in. This is just a 1/4 inch hole. Your two favorite drill bits in the whole world are going to be a 1/4 inch and an 1/8 inch. So get a couple of those. You want split bits that are used for metal. That's the best for drilling on fiberglass and plastic. Don't use a wood bit or a masonry bit. You want a metal fine bit, a split point bit. Anyway, you can simply just drill your 1/4 inch hole into these, about 1 inch or 2. And then simply slide the hoses in there. You don't even necessarily need to glue them sometimes. They'll stay in just fine that way. Now there's some other parts that go on in a similar fashion. Now, this thing is called the HGA. And you know, I'm not exactly sure where all of these terms came from. I think just all the fans in the community invented some of these names, and some of them actually came from the comic books, the cartoons, the books, the movie, whatnot. But this thing is called the HGA. It has 2 holes that you can see here for mounting clippered fittings. And then we've already put the metal screws. These are actual real metal cap pad screws. And then we've simulated this metal washer here for when you apply our sticker to it, or anyone's sticker to it. But anyway, this simply glues on here. You just use your epoxy, use your clamp, mount it, and you want to make sure you orientate it in a way so that the holes are sticking up this way, just sort of at an angle. You could look at a lot of the different pictures and see the differences. All right, now, there's a few other parts that go on. This angled piece is called the PPD. And again, not exactly sure where these came from, but you can see it here on the pack. It has a sticker on it, has a hose coming out of it. And basically it fits into this little area perfectly. Now, you don't want it to sit exactly flush here. You want to let it hang over just a tad, and then it's just a little bit cockeyed, just a tiny bit cockeyed like that. And when you have this in place, it all starts to make sense. Okay? So put a dab of glue on there, set that in there, it fits perfectly. Put your sticker on there, poke your hose in there, that'll be perfect. Now you've got these other two injector filler rods, as they're called. There's two different sizes, and you'll notice that one of them has a little hole on top of it, and that is to fit one of these, little clippered fittings. The taller one sits right down here into this lower section. You can line it up with these two spots and get almost a triangular fashion. Put a little dab of epoxy there, and then the other one just sits right here under the PPD. You can see in this area where it goes. And because it's shorter, it almost appears taller than the other one. But it just fits down into this area. You just kind of have to pick the best spot that you think looks right based on the pictures. And once you get that in there, it'll stay. Now, let's talk about making the parts stay on there. As I mentioned, the glue is pretty strong, but you're still dealing with fiberglass layers and you're still dealing with plastic, so this stuff can break. Now, what we do is we use a rivet gun, and you may not have a rivet gun and you may not want to go through the extra time and effort of doing this, but let me show you how that works. Okay, let's talk about rivets. Now, the reason we use rivets instead of screws is because screws, well, you're dealing with plastic. It's a kind of a powdery type of resin material. Screws can eventually wiggle their way out. The way a rivet works is a little bit differently. These are pop rivets or blind rivets. These are aluminum. You can get them in all kinds of different sizes, and it really doesn't matter what size. We like to use these really long ones. I think these ones are, these are 3/16 diameter, have a large flange head, and now, if you're a muscle man, you can use one of these hand riveters. You can pick one of these things up for 20 bucks, and it's not that big a deal, and you can do it that way. If you want to be a pro, you can use one of these air-powered ones like this. Now, you can pick this up at a Harbor Freight for about 40 or 50 bucks, and if you have an air compressor, this thing is how we do it. And basically, the way a rivet works is when the pin is pulled inside, the head expands and gets bigger, kind of mushrooms out. It's kind of hard to, it's not attached to anything, so it's not working quite the same. But if it had been hooked up to something, it would have worked a little bit differently. So what we do is we add these rivets to back up the glue that we add to these things. So for instance, when you put on the injector tubes, from the other side you drill a couple of holes, add the rivets in there, and now you've got both glue and rivets. Because let me tell you, when you're wearing this thing and you're walking around, you're going to run into some doors, some walls. This thing is going to take a lot of abuse, this riser tower and the ion arm, and you're going to turn around at some point and crack a door frame. So it happens. They're not indestructible. There's a little bit of maintenance that you have to learn when you're owning a pack like this, because eventually it's going to fall over, or you're going to hit the brakes in your car and it's going to fall down, or somebody's going to knock it over. Something's going to happen to it, and you're going to have to re-glue and fix something. It's just the way it is. So you want to become familiar with these methods and how to do it. Let's talk about some of the other parts that I overlooked. Let's see here. Now, we were talking about the bumper. This stack of washers, this is a simulated replica of what the original thing was, which was called a bellows, which is just impossible to find. It's a bellows air thermostat. This is not the correct one, but one that's similar. This one's from 1958. They're pretty hard to find. But you can simulate it by using the stack of washers. You'll drill a hole through here of a 1/4 inch. This will mount in there, and you'll mount a nut on the other side, and that'll hold that. That's pretty self-explanatory. Let's talk about some of these other parts. We have, this is the Ghostbusters 2 version of the rainbow computer wire. And basically, you will drill a hole inside the pack right under this area and just stuff it in there. And then these clamps will meet up. Let's see here. I got my orientation all messed up. But anyway, you'll see how these just go on there, drill a couple of holes, put the screws through there, nuts on the other side. That's how that goes. Pretty self-explanatory. This mesh material, this will simply be rolled up like this. And on the inside of what is known as the in filter, what makes the in filter on this pack special is we've verified these weld lines with the screen used one, and that's how we know that it's the original one. This is called the in filter. There's a little red line sticker that goes across the top of this. On the inside like this, you'll simply place this mesh material in there, like that. And then maybe put a dab of glue on there. And then you get that cool little screened in area inside. Very simple to do. Now, you also get the acrylic lenses. They have a protective coating on them to keep them from getting scratched up. Simply peel that off, both sides. Now, you may have to do a little work to get these to fit exactly right. I recommend if you have a Dremel or some other kind of sanding device, you may need some of that. But on the back side here, you'll simply add some glue. You're going to want to sand this area down. Get yourself a small portable palm sander, like a mouse sander. Sand this area down, and then glue those into place like that. And from the other side, it'll look perfect. It doesn't matter that they're square. You can round them off if you want. The power cell, a little bit more difficult to fit in there. But once you get it in there, you may need to do some trimming, but this will fit in there. I didn't say it was going to be easy. This is why we get the big bucks for building these things. So it's going to take you some time to do this, but it's going to pay off. It's going to be great. Here's another replicated part that we make. This is the clippered valve. Now you can buy real clippered valves for about 40 or 50 bucks, but we've given you this really nice replica, and when you put the label on it, it looks just like the real thing. And it simply goes right there. Drill a couple of small holes to accommodate these screws. Maybe put a dab of glue on it. It'll look like the real thing. Nobody will be the wiser. We'll talk about some other parts. This little metal shaft here, you'll see this area here. Now, this can mount in there just like that, but what you want to do is get some Forstner bits. They're called Forstner bits. This is a flat, round type of drill bit that's used for woodworking, that's made for making a big flush hole. You can buy just the one size bit that you need, or you can get the entire kit for about 30 or 40 bucks from a Harbor Freight for the cheap ones, or you can get the single tool for $5 to $10. And you're going to want to finish that out, paint this black, glue that into place, and it'll be just like this one here where your hose goes. But we like to use real metal because I've seen other prop makers make these out of plastic, and they'll eventually break or crack. You want this to be nice and sturdy, because this hose sometimes gets moved around. You want that to be genuine. Okay. We're not really going to talk about the gun, the wand today, but this is what's known as the Dixie bracket. It's called a Dixie bracket because, well, you ever seen those water coolers with the tube that holds the cups on the side? The Dixie cups? This is the mechanism they use for doing that. Now, this isn't exactly the thing they used in the movie. That was a custom-made piece, but this is the cheapest alternative. These things are, I don't know, 5 or 10 bucks, whatever they cost. And they mount on the side right here. But that'll be a different video. I just wanted to mention it so that you know what it is. Another item I wanted you to know about, this is called the ion arm. This goes on the riser tower. This is made out of metal. Now, I've seen people make them out of wood and plastic and all kinds of stuff. The ones we make are made out of real metal. And it simply mounts like this one here, okay? And because it's real metal, you can scratch off the paint and, make it have this nice, genuine, weathered look, which makes it real fun. let's talk about mounting the shell to the motherboard, okay? Now, first, before you get started, make sure you have it in the right orientation. So notice how this power cell support bracket is off to the left. Now these holes that you see on our main board, this is pre-drilled for our particular pack. The one you get won't have these holes in it. You'll have to drill your own. But let's talk about how this thing fits on here, okay? The main board is supposed to be slightly larger than the shell. So if you look, this bottom metal piece down here, this thing should stick out about 1/8 of an inch. The reason this is here is once it's mounted to the Alice frame properly, it'll be able to stand up like this. That bottom section here, this is a foot so that it'll sit down. And if you do it properly, you'll be able to set the pack down. If you do it wrong, it's going to fall over. Now, you want to have just a tiny little bit of space all the way around this thing. These are cut on a computer-controlled CNC router, so they are perfect to fit the shell. Every once in a while, there's a little bit of warpage in the shell when it's in its naked state, but if you mount it properly, you'll remove any of those, little wonky sections. Now, these things are pretty firm, so that's generally not a problem. I mean, this is the shells that we deliver. But you'll notice that this space here, that should be there. And notice how there's this space all the way around. That's the way you want it. So, what you're going to want to do is get yourself a black Sharpie or a silver Sharpie. Somebody get me a silver Sharpie. All right. This is what we're going to do. We'll take the shell off. Now, let me set this aside. Let me set this right down here. You'll notice these little notches. These coincide with the notches that are on the shell. Okay? Now, there are 4 mounting points. You're going to want to put your brackets about 1/2 inch inside. Got 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top. So that basically when this thing fits on there, when you look at the photos of the pack, you'll notice there's a screw hole right here through this ridge. There's another one right through here. And then there's 2 down here on these lower sections. Basically, it's the second little, whatever this flat thing is called, there's one there and one there. And so the way you achieve that is you basically know how thick this thing is. You know, it's about 1/8 inch thick. And you can see where it sets. So what you'll do is you'll take your, we have these guide holes already drilled in that we use from a template. But what you'll do is when you set your pack there, you can take a little Sharpie and you could say, well, lift it up a little. Okay, I know it's right there and right there. And when you make your little mark, you'll see where it sits. And you want it to be inward a bit. All right, so then what you're going to do is you put once you get these mounted in, basically where you want them, about 1/2 inch in, you'll use your nuts and bolts to mount those in, or use rivets if you're doing it professionally the way we do it, just like they did in the movie. And you get your pack on there, or get your shell on there rather. And then you've got your marks made. You go up about 1/2 inch or so, and you drill your hole in there. And then you're going to want to get a 1/4 inch, a 1/4 by 20 tap. Okay? You can pick this up from Home Depot, Lowe's, or any place tools are sold. It just asks for a 1/4 by 20 tap. And what this does is you put this in your drill, and it very slowly, go very slowly. If you go too fast, you'll strip it out. But what it'll do is, because a lot of these are done by hand, and it'll put the threads in the metal, and you'll be able to take your 1/4 by 20 cap head screw and washer as we've provided, and it'll go right in. It's exactly how they did it in the film. This is how the screen use ones are done, and this is how we do it. So hopefully I explained that good enough, because that's one of the questions people ask the most. How the hell do I mount this thing to the motherboard? Now, another trick, we're not going to talk about the electronics right now, However, I do want to tell you that a mistake that a lot of people make is they glue the electronics to the inside of the shell, and that's not the way it was in the movie. Everything should be mounted to the motherboard, which is why we call it the motherboard. You want to mount a plate here that's going to hold your 4 cyclotron lights. You want to mount a bracket here that's going to hold your power cell. You want to put your speaker, your battery pack, your charging system, your toggle switches, all that. You want everything to be mounted here so that when you want to service the pack, you simply pull this off, and this is not connected with a bunch of wires. The wrong way to do it is to glue all your things in there. That's not the way it's supposed to be done. So we'll talk about that in another video when we're adding the electronics, but just for future reference, as you're putting this thing together, don't glue all your lights and things like that to this. You want everything mounted here so that when you can set this on top, and you'll be able to take this on and off in a few seconds with a drill or with a little hand wrench, and anytime you need to change your batteries or work on it, it'll be super easy. Okay, once you have that hardware figured out, your next project is mounting this thing to the Alice pack frame. So let's set this aside. Let me see the frame. Thank you, my ghost-busting assistant. So, as we talked about, there's a certain placement where you want your frame to sit so that the pack will sit upright. Now, the crazy thing is, you'll notice on where we've drilled our holes, for whatever stupid reason, it just so happens that the mounting hole for the bottom that attaches to this frame is right where this bracket goes. So right below this bracket, as close to here as you can get, is where you're going to want to drill the mounting holes for this. And that'll help you with the placement. So basically, if this were laying down this way, this mounts just like that. Okay? You may not be able to see that very well on camera. But included with your kit are these plastic spacers and these 1/4 by 20 with the washers. And what that's for is, this doesn't sit flush with the main board. It's raised up just a tad, okay? So you'll use this spacer to go in between the Alice frame and your main board and bolt that on. And then you're just gonna take a 1/4 inch drill bit and drill right through this sucker here, right through the center of that, and this bolt's flush right on there. Now I've seen some pictures of some of the screen use packs where they took a big rubber grommet and put it in between here. You can mount it flush to it, or you can put a rubber spacer there. It's up to you. Each actor had their pack done a little bit differently because of their height or the way they wore the pack. Bill Murray liked his to sit up in one way, and Ray liked his a little higher. So it just depended on the actor, and so depending on which pack you're looking at, each one is oriented a little differently. So it's up to you how you want to do it. But if you want it to be able to sit upright like this, this is the way you need to do it. So basically, by looking at this pattern here, you can tell basically you've got, what is that, 2.5 inches, I'd say, from here to there. And if you do it just right, it'll sit just like that, perfectly. Once you have your frame on there, you can add all your straps and all of those things that are included with you. If you're going to cut a hole for a speaker or a charging port or toggle switch, you want to have this figured out first. Because I can't tell you how many times in my early days that we mounted this thing and then realized it was in the way of something else. So make sure that once this is mounted, it's not in the way of something else underneath, like an electronics kit or a speaker. This is how we learn the lesson about this, because it just so happens that these coincide together. You have to, once this is mounted, if you put it in the right spot, you're going to have to drill another hole right there below it that's going to mount the frame to the board. Okay, now that you've gotten your pack all put together, let's talk about decorating it. You've got all kinds of hoses, you got stickers, you got all kinds of things you can put on there. So basically, as you take a look at this finished pack, you'll see you've got this convoluted hose here. Well, underneath it is actually blue hose. That's why we give you extra blue hose. So in between this clippered connection and this one up here on the HGA, you actually take a piece of that blue hose. And our trick to getting this convoluted split loom to stick is we take some black electrical tape, wrap that around, and it just fits right on there perfectly. This other hose, which is the same hose that is used for the wand, you just basically stick it in there, put some glue on it, or maybe some tape on the other side. Same thing here. You're going to have to drill a hole right into this thing. Well, actually, the hole's already there. Look how awesome we are. You just poke that in there and put some glue on it, and you can use hot glue or epoxy or tape for that. It's not that important because it's not under any stress. Of course, your crank knob, you can either paint it gray or you can use a black one and just glue it there, or if you really want to be fancy, you can get a hold of a real one and put it on a real potentiometer knob like this one is. This one uses a real knob, or you can put a nut in there, make it spin around, but most people just glue it on. In the first movie, they had a gray knob. Second movie, they had a black knob. You can paint yours pink. I don't care what you want to do with it. Just stick the knob on there. All right, the riser tower, basically a little bit of glue with this ion arm. Tap it, and these are real stainless head screws. Those go right on in there. Most of the other parts are just simply glued on. You know, this ladder assembly, you'll notice when you look at your ladder, when you turn it over, it's kind of curved a little bit and it's set up. You can glue that onto your booster tube and then follow that up with your quarter taps and then put your screws right in there. Make sure you don't forget your little 3/4 clamp. Take your ribbon cable, twist it. You mount it flat here, twist it, and then poke it in that hole I mentioned earlier. These resistors, you know, if you don't want to use our plastic ones, you can get a hold of the real ones. They're a little bit hard to find, but you can use real screws to mount those, or you can use glue. Let me see what else I'm missing. Decals. We have, your kit comes with a decal kit. And here's some of the decals. And these are done in a metallic look. Like this blue motor synchronous one, you'll notice it sort of fits on there sideways. This one has our premium metal stickers that only comes on our premium packs. But in the kit, you get labels. So this little round label goes on your HGA over here. You've got this danger high voltage silver one that goes here on the front. You've got this larger warning one here, and that goes right up on the top, right by the booster tube. You've got this gearbox one that goes right here. This is called the gearbox. You've got this danger one that goes on the back side. Right back here. And then this yellow filler one here that fits sort of up in this corner area. It's kind of hard to see, but it curves in. And of course, you can refer to your photos for all of these things. And then we throw in a couple other fun ones. Now let's talk about some other decoration techniques that we have. Our main Ghostbuster technician here, Omar, has perfected this. And all you need is a silver Sharpie. You can pick this up at Staples or anywhere Sharpies are sold. And we're going to show you a really cool trick on how to weather your pack and make it look old. So our goal here is to simulate that this is made out of cast metal and has been painted black, and through all the rough wear of catching ghosts, you have scraped the paint off. So we're pulling a little trick on your mind, and all you got to do is take your Sharpie and very lightly on the edges, just sort of kind of make little marks, rub it with your finger like that maybe, you know, add a few spots. Now the trick is you want to put it in areas where it would wear naturally, okay? So like for instance, you know these little corner edges are going to get rubbed on the, you know, on doors and things, you know, and just give it just a little touch, you know. So that's a cool little trick that we use to add realism. Check out how, you know, maybe it's hard to see on camera, but that's how we do it. You know, you just add a little bit of that, you know, rub it a little, make it look natural. There's also dusting techniques people like to do. You can use like some baby powder or whatever and dust the areas, make it look a little bit dusty and add a little bit more contrast to it so it doesn't look shiny and new. You want the thing to look original. I mean, Ghostbusters came out in 1984, so you want this thing to look nice and old. You want it to look vintage. You want it to look industrial. like on these weld lines, this is a great spot to put these little, oh, there you go. Just add just a little touch here and there. Don't overdo it. And it adds a little bit more realism to your pack. Once you get your Sharpie tricks done, your stickers, your hoses and everything's put together, you'll have yourself a kick-ass Proton pack just like this one. We'll talk about the electronics and the wand and all that other stuff later. But for now, that's our instructions on how to put together our Proton pack. So I'm Videobob from Bob's Prop Shop. Make sure to visit us online at bobspropshop.com. Make sure to like our Facebook page at Bob's Prop Shop and also follow us on Twitter. And if you just Google Bob's Prop Shop or Videobob and Ghostbusters, you'll find us. You've seen us on lots of television shows like Pawn Stars, Auction Kings, Discovery Channel, History Channel, all of the networks. We've appeared on all of those cool shows. And you can get involved in your Ghostbuster community. Just search online for the best place to do it. So thanks for watching the video. If you have any questions, come to Bob's Prop Shop and email us and we will help you. We got all the parts you need. So get out in the garage and start building this thing. I'll see you later. I'm Videobob.